I'm going to invite our first panel. So I'd first like to invite Adrian Alexa, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Repositive, which is a startup working with linking genomic data sets. I'd like to invite Kostas Aligiannis, who is a Policy Officer at the European Patient Forum, which is a group that represents the interests of patients. And if he's in the room yet, I'd also like to invite, Denis Horgan, who is the Executive Director of the European Alliance for Precision Medicine. And I'd be grateful if you could give our panelists a round of applause as well. Thanks very much for joining us. Okay, so as I said, we'll have no pre-prepared remarks. The aim here is to have as free-flowing a conversation as we can, but I will take the initiative here and I'll start with some icebreaker questions and see where they take us. I think before I put any questions to anyone as individuals, I just want to throw out some opening ideas to all of you. Where are the best opportunities for improving healthcare using data, and particularly using anonymized data from multiple people? I think I'm going to start with Denis, but as I said, that's a question for everyone. Also, you may have to press the button in front of you to get your microphone to work.
Yeah, so I represent the European Alliance for Personalised Medicine, which is a stakeholder organisation bringing together different type of stakeholder groups. The key issue with personalised healthcare or stratified healthcare is you have smaller patient populations. And with smaller patient populations, because you have better understanding of diseases, you need more information. Before you had population-based healthcare where one size fits all. Now, because of better understanding of molecular diagnostics or understanding of biology, then while breast cancer was just one disease, now you have multiple diseases in breast cancer. And it's similar in terms of other types of diseases. Taking this into account, where you have the issue of data, the question is how and we have better understanding of diseases, how to identify different patients that have certain diseases, and how to treat patients at the right stage. So data is essential to these purposes. The changes in data has revolutionized healthcare in that we can collect data in different ways, we can store data in different ways, we can share data in different ways, and we can interpret data in different ways. So this allows, rather than you just having the doctor, which was the main actor to treat the patients before, now you have multiple stakeholders, including the patient organizations or patient representatives also that can become a driver of healthcare. So it's not only the pharmaceutical, you have the ICT companies, you have medical doctors, you have research directors, you have hospitals, etc. And these provide an ecosystem of data. Anonymized data is very difficult to anonymize data because when you come down to genetic type of data, you're identifying the data set. So it's very hard to anonymize these type of data sets. The question for Europe is, in terms of anonymized data, is what kind of governance framework we can have to allow data to be empowered. And by empowered, we're moving away from protecting the data, but empowering the data so it can be utilized for different purposes. And this needs you need the patient, you need the citizens to be actively involved in this to provide a proper governance framework around this, where it's not about legislating or regulating the future, it's providing a concrete governance framework to allow this to happen. And what we've done in Europe is focus on regulating in terms of legislating. And so you had the data protection regulation, which will come out in a few days, or which will come into force in the next months. But the problem for that is we're trying to legislate the future. And it's very hard to legislate when you want to promote different types of innovation. And this is the issue for Europe. We try to over-legislate, over-regulate, while we need a proper framework for governance. And this is the challenge for Europe. How can we have a tangible governance framework that can empower and share data in different ways? So you have the data protection regulation, which I mentioned, you have the clinical trials regulation, you have in vitro diagnostics, you have Horizon 2020, and all these are frameworks to support sharing of anonymized data. But it's very difficult, as I say, to legislate and regulate for every eventuality. You need a governance framework to do this. And this is the issue, how digital can transform healthcare. And hence today you had a communication that came out called the Communication on Digital Transformation, which I'm sure you will hear a lot about later. I'll stop there.
So is there anything, Kostas or Adrian, that you want to say on that? I mean, what I'm particularly interested in is what can we achieve using data? And I appreciate the difficulties that Denis mentioned with anonymizing genomic data, which is what you work with, Adrian. But what can we achieve using this type of data? Either if it's anonymized or if at least we find the right governance procedures to protect the privacy of the people from whom that data has been taken.
Yeah, maybe if I can add something to the previous question, right? So, you know, what you learn when you start a company and you want to build a product is to be focused, right? So if you think about like, if I need to think about, and I'm very specific here about human genomics data. So, you know, there is a lot more in healthcare, you know, rather than the genomics data. The way where we see a lot of responsiveness, and not only with anonymized data, is a lot of rare disease communities, because those are the individuals that they went through that journey. They understand that, hey, look, you know, when you have like 10, 20 individuals that have a genomic disease, and, you know, like they will die for, not die, sounds bad, that, you know, like they will do anything to meet other people and learn from their experiences. They are very open. They are very open about this, and I see a lot of opportunities there. I think like if you look into the way how easy fundamental science translates into clinical practice, I think in genomics is like 2 to 3% of the research done that can be translated to clinical practice. That's almost nothing. That's peanuts. You need to do something a lot more about this. So I will say that it's even, you know, like forget anonymized data. Let's think. Let's start with, you know, like very small, focused groups, and we will learn from that, and then we can start extrapolating for it. One thing that I start thinking coming here, there was, I think 5-6 days ago, there was an announcement from I think she's called Baroness Tessa Joel, yeah. So 5-6 days ago, she announced that she's going to give away to the public, so openly, so make open, free access to all medical records, all her medical data, which is like, wow. And she's a cancer patient, and you want more of those things. You want that I believe where the opportunities is. Like let's learn from those focus cases.
Kostas, you represent patients on these types of questions. Is there anything you'd like to add from the patient side of things?
Yes, I think the example that you just gave, Adrian, is a very nice one in terms of we see a very big difference between citizens and patients. And when we talk about data protection and anonymized data, reuse of data, research on data of patients, and you can really distinguish between the population of citizens and patients. And EPF is a patient organization, so we represent 72 umbrella organizations. We represent different diseases, so ranging from cancer, rare diseases, diabetes, a lot of different diseases, but we're also present in more or less all the European countries. And when we talk with the people that we represent, what we see is that there is an eagerness to actually use their data. They want their data to be used because they understand the benefits of it. And I think patients, because of their frequent interaction with the healthcare systems, they're much more used to share their data. They're much more used to participate in clinical trials. They're much more used to being a test case sometimes. And there's also this kind of awareness of what this will offer not only to themselves in terms of improving research in the long term, but also to others, because they live with a disease that usually they don't really wish to see other people with. So you see an eagerness to provide their data, and they're much more willing than an average citizen to engage in sharing their data.
If I can add here, I think it's definitely for everyone that is, clinicians, researchers, us tech companies, to build those use cases and dumb them down such that everyone on the street that didn't study genomics or that they will understand it, because I think there is a huge misunderstanding what this data can be used for, and many people will probably look at it like, oh my God, you will know everything about me and you will start abusing my data and all those things. I think it's all about education, or all about advocacy and all those things, kind of building those real concrete examples and showing to everyone and trying to making it as simple as possible. That's why I love the news from Baroness Tess Joel, because it shows that, hey, look, there is a lot more than we can do than just be a bit phobic about.
So Tessa Joel exemplifies the point that Kostas makes when we're healthy. That is, when we're citizens, we don't think that much about sharing our data. It becomes the purposes for doing it become much more apparent when we get ill. I mean, I like the way you said that there's a difference between a patient and a citizen. I remember listening to an interview with Christopher Hitchens after he was diagnosed with cancer, and he said that being taken away by the paramedics was like being ported from the world of the well to the world of the sick. They're like these different universes where people think and behave very differently and are expected to think and behave very differently. So I think I have a two-part question that stems from this. The first is, what would we gain if the people who are still in the world of the well, the citizens that is, not patients, what would be the benefits if they started sharing their data? I mean, within whatever governance framework you think is appropriate to protect privacy, what would that achieve for the inhabitants of the world of the sick? And then I suppose the second part to the question is, how do you make that case to citizens? I'm going to leave that open to whoever wants to jump in first.
So we're all potential patients. So you have 500 million citizens in the European Union, and we're all potential patients. Being healthy, some would say, it's only an undiagnosed illness, because we all are getting ill as one progresses through life. I mean, the society donates their blood. We have a lot of blood banks where you can donate your blood. The same scenario can be developed as we go to sharing one's data. There can be data banks. The question is not to. It's very hard for a citizen or an average person who's not involved every day to day to follow the complexities of how science and innovation and technology is evolving. The question that they would ask is the data that is collected, is it used in the right way? And that is just providing a governance framework, that they are assured that the systems in place that can guarantee this. No, as Kostas mentioned, no patient that has been diagnosed with a very serious illness has any concerns about how their data is shared. And a majority of people, a lot of the younger generation who are active in Facebook and these type of social media tools, they have no problem sharing their data. It's a lot of the older generation that have issues that their data may be used in different types of purposes. So the question is, what kind of frameworks can support the sharing of data? So as I mentioned, and as other speakers mentioned, technology has advanced quite fast. Now we have understanding of, now we can communicate in different ways. Everybody has mobile phones and different issues. The question is, what frameworks can support this? So science has advanced quite quickly, technology has advanced quite quickly, but the regulatory frameworks, they haven't advanced as quickly. And then the complexity for Europe is that healthcare is still a national competence. You have 28 different member states. You have different healthcare systems that deliver healthcare in different ways. And then you have different mechanisms that collect data. One of these is in the area of biobanks. So biobanks is where you collect tissue samples. And they've been collecting tissue samples, which are data samples, for the last 50, 60 years. But a lot of the issues with these, so a lot of the issues, not the, so these are the people have donated their tissue samples, but the question is, how can different type of stakeholders, whether the patients or scientific societies or universities or researchers or the pharmaceutical sector or diagnostic sector, utilize this data? But a problem for this data, it's an issue of how to utilize data, is that the data was collected in different ways, it was stored in different ways, it was catalogued in different ways, so there's a lack of interoperability. So this is a big issue in terms of data. So one is first for the scientific community and the research community to agree, in terms of reference how data is stored and collected and shared, and also that there's security in the data that is there. So I think the discussions often in sharing of data is focused very much on privacy, and it's focusing on protecting. Now, so these words then, when you talk to the citizen, when you say, oh, the data needs to be protected, then one assumes there's going to be something wrong, that somebody's going to use the data in the wrong way. So I think you're starting from a baseline which is causing a negativity. One was highlight the benefits. So by using data and research, this has developed different treatments and diagnostics, which have saved lives. In the area of cancer, this has saved lives in the area of melanoma, in people who have lung cancer, their life expectancy has increased. So the average citizen can understand that by sharing the data, this creates a value in terms of research is developed, which has a benefit that if you have a certain disease, then this can be treated. But the added value as well is by sharing your data, you can understand, you can have a better understanding of one's disease. So maybe if you share your data when you're very young, you could say, I will have this disease at a later stage, or somebody in my family member may have this disease. So how can I mitigate the harmful effects of different diseases? And this is a story, this is a communication exercise to explain to the citizens. But rather than going into the complexity of genomics and explaining the genes and explaining the biomarkers, one needs a narrative to say, these are the benefits. We have a governance framework which is supported by the public sector, which is represented by you, so there's your own representatives, and they're ensuring the data is secured, and there's certain protocols the data can be shared. So in the communication that came out today on the digital transformation, one of the activities that we've put forward as European Alliance for Personalised Medicine, we work closely with DG Connect and the member states, is how can we collect 1 million sequence genomes? And the idea of the sequencing 1 million genomes was rather than saying, how can we solve each and every issue? So we're trying to, because a lot of legislation is responding to what happened in the past. So we're trying to solve issues, which is fine. But the question is, since science is moving quite fast in the future, what framework can support this? So the idea was, how can we collect 1 million genomes at a European level? Now, the number was, we picked the number million because it had a catchy acronym, because it stands for Million European Genomic Alliance, which is a mega idea. So I want a mega idea for Europe. So it had a catchy term, so 1 million. But the idea was what was feasible for the public sector to buy in, what was relevant to what can the Commission facilitate, and as an arbiter between the different types of stakeholders, and then how can the different regulatory frameworks apply to this? So rather than you have the ethicist trying to figure out different things, hypotheticals in the future, or you different type of other type of stakeholders, how can we have a context? So when we say we want to sequence 1 million genomes by 2022, and this number can be leveraged up to 10 million or 20 or whatever number you want to go to, then it provides a context. And how can we get the different healthcare stakeholders facilitating this? So this is the overarching objective. So then you say, okay, data needs to be shared. Okay, so how can the hospital directors in different regions in Europe work together? How can the researchers with this goal look at, this is going to be the future of how we're going to share genomic data, which can be replicated to other types of data sets, or imaging data, or other types of data sets. But looking at just the genomics data, what frameworks can support this at a European level? And then the issue was, so then you have this objective, so the data will be located at the national level, and then it will be different types of frameworks that would support this. So this would build on the existing infrastructure, such as BBMRI, Elixir, ATRIS, and you have other types of initiatives, but you need to link things together. Because a lot of the issues that we tried to do were a siloed-based approach, which were very good, but you need a more a holistic way. And this was the idea of having a broader objective. So rather than having even a siloed-based approach in trying to solve how can we solve clinical trials, do more clinical trials, or get more patients involved. How can we share data? How can we do more diagnostics? Say, what is the objective? And then finding a context. And this is the idea of this mega idea for the million European sequencing million, which came out today in the communication, and which is the Commission is developing going forward.
I would love to be part of that discussion. Very interesting. I will ask you if you guys looked at learnings from the 100,000 genome project in UK.
So this was signed. So what we did for the last 10 months was work with member states to get their political support. So we got with DG Connect and with the Alliance members at the national level, we worked with different ministries to get them on board. So we got 16 member states that signed up to this. So that's Spain, Italy, Estonia, Denmark, Greece, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. So we got some of the major member states to support this. France were also supportive, so they're not there because the research minister said it was a good idea, but then the health minister said we have to get a national position, so then we had to wait. But France were supportive, and Germany had the European elections. But we got most of the bigger member states involved. So then we got the political commitment from the member states to support this, and the Commission is going to facilitate this. UK, despite Brexit, signed the declaration as well. So we will take lessons that have been done for the 100,000 genome project, what worked, and how can we build on this, what worked with the Precision Medicine Initiative in the US, and also China is quite active in this area. So what lessons can we take, what synergies can we learn, well, how can Europe be a center for this type of innovation? Because Europe does have very strict governance rules around sharing of data, and that's an added value, because we don't misuse data. We want to ensure the data is used in the right purposes, and that's a comparative advantage compared to other regions in the world, that we're very careful how data is utilized for historical reasons. But so this is an objective. So of course we will learn from colleagues in the UK, despite Brexit, and other regions like Catalonia, despite the Spanish issue, and we will try to develop a framework going forward on this.
I want to pick up on the point you made about the silos. Because obviously, though the theme today is about our individual responsibilities, it doesn't help too much if we attempt to live up to those responsibilities by sharing our data, and then it ends up getting stuck in some database somewhere and not used properly because it can't be connected with some other database somewhere else. And I think this is a pretty good opportunity for Adrian to explain what Repositive does, because this sounds like exactly the field that you're working in.
Oof, how much time we have? I always struggle to give an elevator pitch. Yeah, so going back to thinking about the silos, why those silos formed, right? So if you think, and again, my expertise is more in genomics data because that's what we do. It's a very new, emergent technology. 8 years ago, there were probably 3, 4, 5 research institutes in the world that could have access to a whole human genome. The technology got commoditized by various companies. Illumina was probably the leading one, and it got the cost from a few $100 to $500, and probably today there are places that you can do a whole human, whole genome sequence for less than $500. So it is a very fast-moving space, and of course, understanding the state, the current state of a disease of an individual. So understanding the molecular characterization of that individual at that particular stage, and it's not only genomics, it's genomics, epigenomics, and proteomics part, is very important for how we are diagnosed and how the therapeutics will happen. So of course the biopharma and the biotech organizations, they were very interested in this and they invested a lot into it. So because they were protecting their interests, there were a lot of those silos formed. On the other side, on the public sector or academic sector, the research funders, and probably this kind of also relates a bit to the previous question, what are the policymakers doing about this? If you look I'm not that aware of what's happening or who are the guys in, I don't know, Europe in general, but in UK you have Wellcome Trust, you have the research funders that are, and I'm pretty sure it happens here as well, that are enforcing the researchers that, once they get a grant, the data that is produced needs to go in those repositories. But those repositories, they don't have a full understanding of what is the privacy concerns around the privacy things around this data, how how this data can be used. So all of a sudden, because you have a lot of questions that you can't ask, you are very restrictive in the way how you are going to make this data public, or not public, how you can leverage the data, right? Because it's not about, hey, let's make everything free, and it's about how we can get insights from the data. In my opinion, I think no one really needs data. Everyone needs insights from the data. So I don't. Those silos formed because it's such a fast-moving sector that we have a lot of questions that we can't really answer, and I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just we need to be patient and we need to figure out, okay, what is the information that we can make publicly available. I can give a anecdote use case here. So at Repositive, we start working with, so we try to build a marketplace. So one of our products is a marketplace between biopharmas and CROs, so CROs, contract research organizations. So biopharma outsource a lot of their preclinical experiment to other organizations. And when you go to those CROs, and the CROs, for example, they are growing cells in petri dishes, and they implant tumors into mouse models, and they are selling services on those models to biopharma. But then when you go to them and you ask them okay, how are you selling your services? What's your shop window? They will say well, we don't tell anything until we sign a CDA, which is a quite thick kind of contract. And it's okay, why would I sign a CDA if I be biopharma with you without you telling me anything? Well, okay, so what are you telling? Well, we have a phone conversation first. Okay, so what are you telling them in the first phone conversation? Are you telling them that you have models for lung cancer? Oh, yes, we do tell them what kind of models we have. Do you tell them how many models you have? Yes. Do you tell them what kind of molecular characterization, so particular signatures you have there? Yes. So if you go to them and you ask them what information are you willing to make public, what to put in your shop window, they will say nothing. If you start digging deeper, you will realize that, hey, there is a lot of information that can be made useful first for them to build that shop window and then to make them discoverable. And that's basically what we're trying to do at Repositive. We're trying to find ways to create these metadata, dataset descriptions to help discoverability of the data. And we start from very focused things like, cancer models to a more holistic thing, which is about the world of human genomics data. So you have data that, like because of technologies, sequencing technologies like Illumina, again, data production of, or production of sequencing data, let's put it like that, increases at an exponential rate faster than Moore's law, right? So it's like, okay, do we have an idea who is producing this data? How much data is there? Until now, until 5 minutes ago, I didn't have any idea that, EU wants to sequence 1 million genomes. Like there is a lot of data that is there. What we try to do, we try to map this. We try to say, okay, who has what is that about, without necessarily going and saying, like, hey, this is the really raw genomics data.
So, taking the lead from that 1 million genomes project, at the beginning of the panel, Denis mentioned that one of the problems you have is that with regulation, you said you're regulating the future on the basis of evidence from the past, and this is a problem in the data economy generally, and I'm sure in plenty of other fields too. And I think it's sometimes it's a problem you can't avoid with regulation. But obviously regulation is not the only kind of policy out there. There are other things that policymakers can do to, for example, with regard to the silos problem, they can lead standards development. But I want to move kind of back to the individual a little bit. So a lot of European countries already have pretty effective policies to encourage people to become blood donors or organ donors. Some countries have opt-in methods, some have opt-out. I noticed that in Belgium it's opt-out. The UK, it was opt-in when I lived there. It may have changed. So I think I'd like to put the question to Kostas. What should policy do, and what should healthcare professionals do, healthcare providers do, to involve citizens in the idea of building common resources to benefit patients in the way that we've done with blood and organs? How do we do that with data?
I think the easy thing with blood donation or organ donation is that it's very simple to understand. You donate your blood, you donate your organs, and the purpose of it is very easily understood by everyone. So I think what is missing when it comes to data donation is the understanding of the advantages that it can have for other people, and also for yourself maybe in the long term. And there is a problem in communicating this to the general public. I think not everyone feels touched by this at the moment. Of course, regulation cannot be left out of it, in the sense that all of this is happening under the assumption that your data is securely shared. It's not about you have the two parallel discussions about privacy and what part of your data you might want to share, and then there is the kind of given that you need to have that this all happens in a secure way, and that no one will use your data if you don't want to share it. I think a third element is that of choice. Even when we talk about blood donation or organ donation, you see that in the countries where it's compulsory and you can opt out, usually there is a much higher degree of acceptance in the population. So a lot of people wouldn't opt out if they have to, but if they have to opt in, then they might not go through the trouble to do that. But the element of choice is there, and I think that's very important. Maybe not everyone wants to share their data. There is, probably citizens have other concerns, but when you look at the patient community, there's different diseases with different implications. There is, a cancer survivor that has gone through a specific cancer and is now fine might not care so much about this data, even if they do share it and it is leaked somehow to their insurance or to whoever. The consequences might be very different than an, HIV positive person, for example. There is different diseases that have different implications on your life, and there is a different stigma attached to it. There is a difference in who will get this data. So I think the three elements that I would say are important is that of choice. security being there, yeah, and the privacy to the extent that you want it.
And I think this comes back to the original point about we need to perhaps have a different kind of conversation, and it also highlights the differences between the member states. You say that, you know, the opt-in states, the opt-out states for organ donation perhaps have higher acceptance. And your point about HIV is well taken. I mean, there are still European member states that require HIV-positive people to sign a register, which obviously is going to create anxiety in these areas.
Maybe to add, I think the advantage is also very important too. I think we don't really, we think about maybe research of understanding a specific disease better, developing drugs, but there's a lot of things that you can achieve through data sharing in terms of managing your disease, how you manage your disease, the easiness with which you can do it. If you have certain apps that will help you communicate with your healthcare professionals that you're in touch with, and you might not have to have so frequent visits, because through an app where you monitor your daily situation, they might get this information, so you don't have to go once a week to see them. There's the general function of the healthcare system. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that you can get out of data sharing that might not be specifically of developing a drug against your specific disease, but they're much broader. And I think also communicating those advantages and those benefits that you can generate to the patient community, but also the general public is very important.
So unless Denis or Adrian want to add to that, I'm going to open up to... Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just on this point there. So Europe doesn't want to sequence a million genomes. He wants to facilitate and collaboration between different stakeholders that's on behalf of the Commission. We don't want to sequence, I'm not saying we want to go out and sequence a million genomes of people's citizens. He wants to provide a framework to empower the member states to work together to facilitate this. So this will be just a caveat there. And just on the point of patient, explaining to patients, one of the key actors in the whole, there's a lot of data there already that we have. And one of the key drivers of improving healthcare, improving innovation of healthcare, is the family physician, the general practitioner. This is the closest healthcare actor that sees the patient on a regular basis. If they can, or he or she can act more to communicate the benefits of sharing data, but also the way that they collect the data and they can share it within the healthcare system, this would support the data-driven healthcare. Also the pharmacist. The pharmacist also can report if a certain patient is getting a certain side effect of different diseases, then there can be more pharmacovigilance reported outcomes about different issues. So all this, it needs a revolution in terms of in the healthcare ecosystem. The same way as the airline industry has totally revolutionized in the passenger checking in and buying their own ticket, etc. The same way healthcare can do this. So it's not only technology, it's the healthcare actors themselves that need to be more proactive. And I say the family physicians or general practitioners are really one of the key drivers, because it's very difficult to educate every single individual patient, no matter what you do. But a family physician can be an intermediary that is very close to citizens, but they can have an interface between 1,000, 2,000 or 3,000 patients within a geographical area, a local area. So this can act as a bridge to the patients, to citizens around the whole issue of data sharing and empowering data.
I really like what you said about the practitioner GPs to advocate for data sharing or whatever the benefits of being open about data, because if you look about the pace that the technology develops, and we can talk about AI and VR and all those kind of things, they really get, they are totally surpassed. Even if you look at like big clinics that treat cancers, the clinicians are not educated in genomics, and it's very, very hard for them if you bring them a report which gives them, hey, this is the molecular characterization of this, to interpret that. So it will, sooner or later, probably 5-10 years, it will get, there will be an ecosystem of applications, and diagnostics and therapeutics will get commoditized. We'll do it at home. And the fact that, of course, you will still go to a GP or to a practitioner because you need that human interactions. But probably the best you can do right now is to really tell the people the benefits of being open about how they use the data. I like that.
And just to add, it's not about the sharing. It's not about the. Patients are key stakeholder, key driver. But there's a lot of data there already. The key issue is interoperability between member states, between hospitals agreeing to share data, or departments agreeing to share data. And they need proper interoperability in the systems, and that is the key issue. Now at the right time with genomic-based data to provide the systems in place that can provide the protocols and allow for interoperability. The issue with the data protection regulation is the issue of alignment between member states, how they're going to align in the sharing of the data. And that's the issue. It's not that complicated, but you just need alignment. And this is the question, how to do that in the correct way.
Great. Okay, so with the time we've got left, I'd like to invite questions from the audience. If anyone would like to ask our panel a question. Because I don't think the coffee's ready yet. Oh. Do we have any GPs in the room, by the way? No, I didn't think so. Okay, if there's no questions, I could plow on. So I think let's play back into this idea about how we get citizens as opposed to patients thinking more about data sets, and I think will some of it have to come with, I mentioned at the start that the social benefits outweigh the individual benefits, but that doesn't mean there are never individual benefits. Precision medicine, personalized medicine, where your GP can say, right, I'll take your genome and I'll tell you what you're at risk of. It's still an idea that's in its early stages. As that becomes more prevalent, where you're already submitting some data for your own use, is there some kind of framework by which we can say, okay, well, if you're receiving this benefit from your data being processed in this way, we want to be able to learn from the data in ways that could help other people. And is there I said I don't want to use the R word, I don't want to talk about regulation necessarily, I'm thinking more policy. Is there a policy framework we could come up with that would make that work? I'm going to start with Denis, and then I'll work back towards me.
Yeah, so the issue with you're talking about consent of use of data.
Yeah.
So when we had the discussion in the European Parliament, so you had a proposal coming from the Commission, then the Commission, and then the Parliament had its opinion, and there was over 4,000 amendments on how one can utilize and share data. The issue of consent, and then you had Jan Albrecht, who was a German MEP, who was a lead rapporteur of the dossier, and he wanted one of his proposals, because he was very concerned with the whole issue around Facebook, how Facebook was utilizing data and different issues around that. And this is reflected as well over the last weeks when we see the difficulties with Cambridge Analytica and how they were utilizing data. So the question he proposed that if data was so there's a lot of data in biobanks and especially for breast cancer tissue samples, and if this was used for one purpose, then if the data sample was used for one purpose, then the patient would have to be informed. And if it was used for X and X purposes, then it would have to be informed again and again and again. And to do that, then that would create a huge bureaucracy, and it would add to the cost of doing basic research. So what we propose that the patient would give his or consent at the beginning, and then this data will be used for within a certain framework for public health research reasons. Then the data will be used for that purposes. So this has been not solved, but there's a framework in place now that governs this issue. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's very difficult to legislate for every eventuality, and that's the problem that Europe has. Europe wants to ensure proper safeguards are in place, but it's very difficult to foresee how innovation is evolving. What you need is to have a broad governance framework that allows trust between the public institutions, allows a framework for the private sector to be involved, which drives forward innovation. And data is a key aspect of this. I mean, data is there, data is utilized, and the question is that data is not misused. A lot of the questions around the concerns of citizens or patients is that this data may be used by their future employers, which they make decisions that they should not get this or this job for this or this reason. Or the insurance companies may say that they will not insure this person because this person has a predisposition to a disease and this person now is 20 and he should not get this, he should not, and this particular disease, for example, is an eye disease, so he should not. So if he wants to get car insurance, then his car insurance should be very high, or he may not get car insurance and he can't drive. So the citizen has this concern, which is a crucial concern. But then there's a big body of legislation there existing called discrimination legislation, which one can say that if somebody is discriminated against for religious reasons or for ethnic reasons or for social reasons, or disability, then that legislation is there. The same legislation can be also applied to the issue around if somebody was discriminated against a certain disease that he or she would get in the future, and this takes account of the concerns of how data is utilized. It's of course, you can have opt-outs, and a citizen can say, well, he has certain concerns, and that his data will be misused. But majority of citizens give a huge amount of data already, tax information. I mean, a load of private information to the state, and the state acts as a guarantor of this information. The state as well can act as a guarantor for the healthcare data as long as used within the certain parameters. So the majority of citizens and patients have confidence in the healthcare system. The question is, how can you get the other healthcare state actors to empower data? And this is the issue. Consent is one issue. But if data is utilized for a wrong reason, there can be a consequence for this person or our organization. The issue why the diagnostic legislation was revised, and this was due to an issue with the PIP scandal, where you had silicone that was used for breast implants, and it wasn't biological. It was the wrong type of silicone, and this was a criminal act. So the legislation in diagnostics, which led to the whole revision of the in vitro diagnostics and the medical devices, was due to the issue of a criminal act. In the same way, if data, so the majority, what I'm trying to say, the majority, in a long way, the majority of healthcare stakeholders are acting in a proper way. They want the best for the patients, they want the best for society, but they need to be empowered. Of course, doctors have concerns of what's the role of putting all this stuff online and how to do this in a way that makes it easier, or how can the visualization of this data. So these are all issues where the whole area is evolving, which takes time. But if Europe wants to take a leadership role in this, they need to put the frameworks in place now with like an objective of sequencing a million genomes, and this could provide, in the next 5 years, next 10 years, a framework to go forward, where you bring everybody with us progressively, and they shape the framework. Not saying that this is the way we should do it, but this is the way, a broad framework which takes account of the national context, the regional context, and the specific issues of different patients and citizens.
So I appreciate concerns about, for example, data falling into the hands of insurance companies. I mean, I'm always cautious when we talk about discrimination in insurance, because insurance is discriminatory. The question is, what characteristics are we willing to allow insurance companies to discriminate on, and which ones are we not going to allow them to discriminate on? But that's a concern that arises once the data gets shared with other organizations, other businesses. But there's also a question when it comes to consent around reuse, which isn't quite the same as sharing. So there was a case that you might be familiar with in London at the Royal Free Hospital, where DeepMind was working with the hospital on, they were testing an app that it was an AI system to diagnose kidney injuries, and the Data Protection Authority, the Information Commissioner's Office, intervened because it was a fairly small detail in UK health legislation, whereby basically if you're using health data for direct patient care, you don't need to seek additional permissions, but if you're using it for any other purpose, you do. And the issue here was, well, they were testing the safety of the app first before bringing it into direct patient care, and in order to use it in direct patient care, they had to make sure that that the results, that the decisions that doctors were making on the basis of the results were the right ones, which is quite a kind of a small area of the law, but it was a big problem for the project. Are there changes we can make here? I mean, in the UK case, as I understand, like the UK has its own version of secondary legislation where the Secretary of State can make changes to laws at this sort of detailed level. But are there changes that need to happen in policy and regulation whereby those types of reuses are easier, and where the data's not being given to any other organisation, it's staying in the hospital, it's just being used in a different way? I think maybe Kostas should, yeah.
Well, I think it's a matter of choice, if you ask me, and I think the legislation or regulation should allow the flexibility to adjust to different needs and different wants. I mean, everyone has different points in which they put a red line of where they do not want to share their data for. There's people that want to share their data for secondary use, no matter what it's for. There is people that don't really want to share their data if it's going to create profit for someone. There's people that don't care about that because they see the benefit that they will get from this. And I think just the best framework that you can have is that of an informed consent that would allow the person in this case to make their choices for themselves. And I think the biggest advantage that informed consent gives you is not to just have it as a tick box in the end of any form that you would say, I want to use this for this and that, or this kind of terms and conditions thing, but actually explaining what this is all about. And if you explain to someone what the added value of him or her is to consent to certain things, they're probably much more likely to do it than if you just put it as a tick box in any form. So I think it's not a matter of there should be regulation that is flexible enough, but also strict enough that people can't just do whatever they want with your data. But at the same time, there should be a much more of an obligation of when you actually use the data, explaining what you're using it for. And I think this lack of information is usually the key element that people would look at when they decide whether they want to share their data or not. And yeah, I think it's a very personal thing. It depends on your situation, on a lot of your experiences, and giving the choice is very important.
Can I ask a question? Because I think this is the right environment for that. So I'm not a legislation or governance expert, but and I think very much from a technology point of view. And is it possible to have legislation that is dynamic enough, or can be adapted as we go? Because from my point of view, and I mean that's me being naive, I think it's impossible to create a framework that will be the perfect framework and say hey, this is what's possible with whatever, call it genomic data or clinical data or any type of data. Us as technology companies, we will always find loopholes, right? I mean that's how the game is. So regulation come here, we'll go and find something and go above it, and then regulators probably needs to come back and address those things. I think today it's easy to talk about, hey, look how naughty Facebook were, but why didn't we thought about this 5 years ago? Well, we didn't thought about this because we couldn't see those cases, or if we would have built regulation for that, you wouldn't have built those things. So like we understand, like 1/1,000,000th, which about our human body or whatever. I mean, even less, about genomics data and all that. We have no idea, what's possible to do with that data. If we try to overstructure that, I mean, either we stop innovation, what you are alluding to, or, if we are to lose, of course, it shouldn't be free for all. But I wonder, are there mechanisms, I mean, that, you let, you let technology companies or whatever to push the boundaries, and then you come back and can it be done in a very agile way, in a very, very dynamic way? Because until now so yeah, that's my question. Is that possible? Are there any models that work?
So I definitely have my own thoughts on that, but as the moderator, I think I should give it to the other panelists first before I say anything.
I mean, for companies, for ICT companies or technological-based companies, the first aspect of regulations provide certainty. So you want certainty as well, that the frameworks that we're all abiding by guarantee surety that if you develop this and this and this, then you will be able to bring this to the market or bring this to the healthcare system. The role of regulation then is also to act as a framework to that if certain, like a contract, if certain issues go wrong, then there is if somebody acted in this way, or if somebody did this out of the terms, then there's a consequence for this. So you need this in life, but you also need what you're inferring. You need adaptability in terms of the legislative framework. So this is possible, and this comes down to So as I keep saying, you cannot. And what Kostas was referring to, we cannot say that every use of a tissue sample or every use of data sample, we cannot foresee every use. Because we only taking account what he said, there's only 1 million understanding of what we know of the human biology, or 1 billionth way that we can understand how data can be utilized. So the question is, what framework can allow this innovation to evolve? And this is happening. You have as in a research lab, you have people innovating. And the question for Europe is, how can we bring innovation at a quicker and faster pace into healthcare systems? Europe is governed by so many different regional systems, local systems, and governance frameworks, but it has a problem of bringing innovation to healthcare systems compared to America. And so there's a gap, an innovation gap in Europe. It's not that we have a problem developing the science. It's not the problem we have developing the technology. For example, a company we refer Illumina, a company that brought down the cost of sequencing from $1 billion to $1,000. This company originated from UK, but then it was bought up. The technology and the science came from a UK-based company. It was bought up by an American company. And now then the EU lost out on this. So the question for Europe is, how can we bring innovation at a quicker and faster pace? What we have in Europe is fantastic. We have good data protection rules, which are needed. We have good frameworks. We have good university. We have good scientists. The problem is, how do we drive forward in a social value way this innovation? Can you get a quicker and a faster pace to the European level? And Europe is forming these type of activities. The Million European Genome activity, to sequence 1 million, which is only a number, but you can leverage it up. This provides a framework between member states and regions to collaborate. And they have set out in different steps in this declaration that is signed on the 10th of April, like for voluntary cooperation agreements between different member states to cooperate on different ways. So this will provide a set of, there's different frameworks to do this. You can form a set of guidelines that are terms of references, that we agree to do this, this, and this within a set, within the broader DPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. But based on this framework, say data will be shared for public health research reasons along this and this way, and there will be interoperability between different centers or that will allow this innovation to take place. So this is in place. I mean, healthcare is a sphere where, compared to transport or compared to energy, is very different at the European level, or agriculture. These were areas that were developed over the last 40, 50 years. Healthcare and data coming together, first data and healthcare coming together is a new type of issue. So this marriage has to be developed and grow. I mean, like our old marriages, takes time to understand each other. And then the question is, how can member states collaborate or region collaborate on this type of activity? And this takes time to evolve. Now we're starting on this, so we're moving forward.
I'm sorry to cut this short, but the coffee's ready. So I think we can reconvene in here in about 10 minutes' time for our next panel. Thank you very much to our panelists.